Era todo para mí, Dios mío.
She sits on a rock above what was once her home. For days, she would come to where the Fuego volcano destroyed her life, to cry, to wait, to wonder what will happen now. Her 6-year-old daughter was sleeping that Sunday afternoon when the cloud of ash and gas engulfed her home. She had no time to get her out of the house. The child trapped under a ton of rubble, ash, and mud.
Yo no sé qué voy a hacer sin mi hija. Yo soy padre y madre, soy madre soltera. Yo a ella traté de darle lo mejor, yo a ella le daba lo que yo podía, lo que ella
A Mexican relief team, expert in digging through rubble, continued to work in what was left of the village of El Rodeo, pledging to find as many bodies as they could, with no hope of finding anyone else alive. At one point, a worker offered a hug and a few kind words, a small comfort in the face of such enormous grief. Grief shared by thousands who lost family members, friends, homes. Loss and tragedy that came suddenly and with violence. Sunday morning, that 3rd of June, was like any other in El Rodeo on the slopes of the Fuego volcano. People usually rise early, taking advantage of a day of rest after working in sugarcane fields or small businesses nearby. They went about their day as they always do, accustomed to the constant rumbling and tiny earth tremors produced by one of Central America's most active volcanoes. But that morning, some villagers noticed the explosions were more intense than usual. The plume of smoke that almost always billows from Fuego's crater, darker and denser. As the hours passed and the smoke clouds started to grow, dozens of people walked to a nearby bridge to get a better view of the eruption, never imagining it would cause one of the biggest natural disasters to hit the country. Videos posted by survivors on social media show panicked onlookers rushing for safety when they realize the intensity of the cloud. Many were unsure of where to run to escape the hot, dense cloud of ash and gas that barreled down upon them at speeds of more than 100 kilometers per hour and reaching temperatures of nearly 1,000 degrees Celsius. When the dust settled, the cloud disappeared, the severity of the disaster began to reveal itself. Dazed survivors gathered in improvised shelters. Rescuers attempted to walk into the most affected parts of El Rodeo, working long hours and withstanding horrific conditions as they looked for survivors and the bodies of those killed in the eruption. As the days went on, rescuers and volunteers continued to work feverishly at the disaster site. Volunteer groups distributed aid to shelters and to communities that did not evacuate their homes, but that were cut off from the outside world and were running short on food and supplies. 5 days after the initial eruption, officials started taking stock of what had happened. 1.7 million people were affected. Nearly 1,000 houses and buildings were destroyed. More than 3,000 people were in shelters in nearby towns. And as the numbers started to come in, so did questions about how effective the government response had been in the initial days of the disaster. A priest from neighboring El Salvador said he was stopped at the border with 11 tons of aid and supplies. Guatemalan customs officials told him they could not let the aid into the country. The foreign ministry took 3 days to emit a declaration that would allow Guatemalan embassies to receive aid and donations around the world. And as thousands of ordinary Guatemalans flocked to collection centers around the country to donate food, clothing, blankets, and medical supplies, the government announced the army would take control of all those goods. The most pressing question, why weren't villagers on the volcano's slopes told of the imminent danger? A group of opposition representatives in Congress called for an investigation into allegations of mismanagement of the crisis. Paul Briere is one of the congressmen who demand answers.
Bueno, la reacción del gobierno muy tardía, muy lenta, muy mala. El que debería estar en el día a día debería haber volcado toda esa agenda a este tema, debería haber sido el presidente, debería de haber cancelado lo que fuera necesario para entrar a este tema. Ahorita siento que es momento de dejar que las labores de rescate continúen y posiblemente la otra semana, 1 o 2 semanas, podría empezar ya de fondo una investigación o colaborar con el Ministerio Público para esta investigación.
By Saturday, nearly a week after the disaster, the questions had turned into protests. Hundreds gathered in a torch-lit rally in front of the National Palace in Guatemala City to demand the government to take more action to help survivors and to find and bury the dead. The main question has to do with the timing of the government's decision to order mandatory evacuations on the volcano and how prepared the country was to respond to volcanic eruptions. Guatemala has 37 volcanoes, 4 of which are continuously active. It has adopted numerous international safety and disaster preparedness protocols, but has little in terms of technical resources. The Fuego volcano was monitored by only 2 seismographs controlled by INSIVUME, the National Meteorology, Seismology and Volcanology Institute, which is the first line of defense. The morning of the eruption, scientists started issuing warnings about an increase in activity on Fuego early in the day. Eddie Sanchez, its director, has been with INSIVUME since it was created following a devastating earthquake in 1976.
El día domingo lanzamos 9 boletines, comenzando con probablemente el más temprano a las 6 de la mañana. Tuvimos una secuencia de las 6, 10 de la mañana, 13:40, 13:35, 16:50, 7 de la noche y hasta las 10 de la noche que la erupción se paró. En todos los boletines hicimos la advertencia de flujos piroclásticos, indicando de que iban a haber avalanchas de gases ardientes, que son los flujos piroclásticos, los cuales bajan a gran velocidad.
But it is not up to INSIVUME to order evacuations. That task belongs to another government agency, CONRED, the National Commission for the Reduction of Disasters. Survivors from the affected villages say they were not given enough warning to leave and get out of harm's way. A video circulated on social media of a woman yelling at relief workers asking why they had not warned them of the imminent threat. CONRED says it has followed standard protocols since the beginning of the disaster, protocols designed to specifically prevent the loss of life. Alejandro Maldonado ran CONRED for 8 years up until his abrupt removal shortly after current President Jimmy Morales took office in 2016. He says the systems he left in place called for the use of precise scientific data in determining when to order evacuations.
Es una fórmula matemática. Se toma el promedio de la actividad constante y permanente del volcán y se analiza cuántas desviaciones estándar por arriba del promedio se encuentra la actividad en ese momento y eso determina qué nivel de alerta declaramos nosotros. En ese momento nosotros tomamos una serie de acciones en preparación, aunque todavía no sepamos si va a seguir una actividad normal, si va a aumentar, si va a bajar. Sin embargo, el protocolo es de que empezamos a enviar recursos al campo y salen lo que nosotros llamamos los equipos de respuesta inmediata, que su función es de coordinación, una coordinación táctica, es decir, operativa en el campo.
But the allegation is that the current head of CONRED, a political appointee, did not follow those protocols.
Esta negligencia creo que ya es un poco más también. Creo que sí aquí hay una responsabilidad mayor que hay que ver qué pueda suceder y que nosotros también se tomen las medidas. CONRED para eso fue creada y que ya se tomen acciones contundentes y si el secretario ejecutivo de CONRED tiene que salir, pues obviamente tiene que ser destituido con una responsabilidad bastante seria.
Guatemala's Attorney General said her office would investigate whether CONRED was at fault for not issuing timely evacuation orders and whether it followed established protocols in placing emergency response resources in place prior to the eruption. But amid the finger-pointing, there is also an effort to look towards the immediate future. CONRED estimates at least 1,000 homes were lost and predicts those families will be living in shelters for at least several months. One international aid organization in Guatemala, Project Concern International, already met with officials to discuss ways of moving forward, looking for ways to help the more than 3,000 people in the shelters. Pascal Wagner is PCI's country director in Guatemala. She says the first step is to gather information.
Enumeration in the sense that we want to have a socio-economic profile for the people that are displaced right now and staying in these collective centers, and understand how they can contribute to their own recuperation, to the whole recuperation of the family in terms of their livelihoods, and how they can contribute eventually, even in the rebuilding of their households. No?
Wagner says it could take up to 3 months before concrete rebuilding can begin.
After 3 months, in the coordination that we will be doing with private and public sector, civil society, the NGOs that are on the territory, we hope to have, we want to map also all the possible offers that are available, the different financing that are available, the different organizations that want to contribute, the international cooperation, what they're going to be contributing, the government itself, what are they suggesting, and kind of map all these offers and possibly have a menu of options. That would be differentiated based on the need of the families.
The government says it is already looking at 2 possible sites to relocate El Rodeo and surrounding communities. It is looking at farmland recently seized from drug traffickers that could be used as a new site for a rebuilt community. But as the authorities look ahead, they also have to be prepared for the coming days. According to some estimates, more than 50 million cubic meters of ash and lava were generated in the eruption. With the rainy season at its peak in Guatemala, mudslides are being triggered, leading the authorities to worry about even more damage in the near future.
Esto no quiere decir que todas son casas. Ahí tenemos algunas iglesias,
Walter Monroy is with Conred.
Es una escena que tenemos que trabajar de una forma con mucha precaución para no generar disturbio o malos entendidos en la población. Al final resulta que sabemos que hay una escena complicada y que al final en algún momento el material va a bajar, y ese material al bajar, las barrancas no se van a dar abasto. Tenemos infraestructura en la parte de abajo de las cuencas bajas, infraestructura de puentes, líneas de conducción principal de energía eléctrica.
As survivors continue looking for lost loved ones, contemplating a future more uncertain than ever, that contemplation is for everyone involved. Those who rushed in to help in the immediate aftermath, and those charged with moving the affected communities forward and past the effects of the biggest eruption to hit Guatemala in 30 years.